Good morning. Good morning. I'm going to give a second for people to join us live. I did announce I was going to be doing this live yesterday, so I want to be fair and give people time to get on. However, if you're new to me, you've never seen my live, or someone tagged you in this, or someone shared this, hello and welcome. My name is Shakti. I'm a human design specialist, and I work with entrepreneurs to help them activate their genius and eliminate things like chaos and burnout in business. In this particular video, I want to share an analogy that happened for me this past weekend as I was creating some content for social media, and I happen to be very visual in the way that I learn and the way that I process information. And I was putting together these pieces of material. This analogy came forward, and I said, this is such a perfect example of the components of business and how some of them get looked at and others get ignored, and why some get looked at and why others get ignored. And so I wanted to talk about the SPERM and egg story. I'm spelling it out because at this point in time, I honestly don't even know what words are getting flagged on the internet, and I don't feel like having this entire video flagged. So if we think about biology in the beginning of life in a very basic format, we think about the egg and the way that now we understand this song and dance to go between the egg and the tadpole, is what I'm going to call it, so that I don't have to keep spelling. We used to think that, when we were creating life, there would be an egg, and then there would be all these tadpoles rushing to the egg, and then the fastest tadpole or the strongest tadpole or whatever would be the one that would break through the egg, and the fertilizing process would begin, and the embryo would begin to be formed. That's what we used to think happened. Now we know that it's not actually the tadpole that decides who gets into the egg. It's the egg who chooses a tadpole. And the egg decides which one is going to be the one that permeates and begins life. I don't know if you knew this, because this is relatively new to the conversation of biology and the creation of life, but this is what they have discovered, which I think is fascinating, and it really makes this entire conversation about the beginning of life so much more interesting and nuanced than I think we thought it was. Hello, I see you guys are hopping on. Please say hi in the comments. So in thinking about this, it got me thinking about business and the facets of business. And I'm going to be sharing a post that kind of outlines this very clearly this afternoon. There's a masculine component to business, and then there's a feminine component to business. The masculine component to business is what we all think of when we think of business. We think of things like systems and strategies and the actions that you are taking, the social media content creation, the marketing stuff, the ad creation, the funnels, the scaling, things of this nature. These are all components of business that are very action-oriented and very masculine, and yet when we think about business, this is the only real concept of business that we have. This is what we think of when we think of business, all of these systems and strategies. What we miss is the feminine receptive component of business, which I identified as being identity and purpose, okay? And in the post that I'm going to share this afternoon, I'll have an image for you, an iceberg image that I made myself to help you understand visually how these two components work together. The identity and purpose aspect of business is where the ground gets laid for everything else that comes next. It's where you receive your purpose. It's where you receive the calling. It's where you get the activation to create a business and to go out and serve and do something. And it almost seems to me like the world of business has become where identity and purpose is almost an afterthought. It's like you get into business and you're trying to make it profitable as quickly as possible, and then along the way, let's figure out why we're doing this. And what's really the deep activation behind this. Like, yes, we're solving a problem. I think everybody starts there, but they start there from a very like masculine angle, like, oh, we need a problem that we can fix, then we can make money off of. You know, there's not really like a receiving of purpose in this view of business, like old world view of business that I have called it. And so if we go back to the analogy of the egg and the sperm, right? There's all this glorification for the tadpole. There's all this glorification for how fast the tadpole can be, how strong the tadpole can be, like who's gonna get there first, who's gonna win the egg, who's gonna make it, who's like, we have all glorified that component of business. We've made that like spectacular. And we've almost made the feminine component of business, which is actually deciding where everything goes and how everything happens, an afterthought, not as important, soft, woo-woo, not really worth the amount of attention versus all of the other metrics, all the other things that are considered more masculine in nature. And as a result, we've created a very disproportionate experience of business, especially for the feminine, especially for women, because that feels very inorganic for us, because we are the egg. Because the feminine is the receptive, and she allows and she receives, and then from that place she gets activated, and then she can move on and create and do with what she's received and what she's allowed. And so approaching this whole thing kind of backwards creates a lot of tension emotionally, energetically, physically, for feminines especially, because it's inorganic to our nature. It doesn't follow a natural pattern, so to speak, for who we are and how we are designed to operate. And so I was reflecting a lot on this past weekend, because my own story of how I did exactly that. When I came onto the digital business or online business scene, I was given so much strategy and, you know, structure and systems, and I was given so much of that because the belief was, if you just have all these systems and you have all these structures and you have all these actions that you know how to take, then it'll just make your business automatically successful and it'll be so much easier. And what was happening on the back end of that was I was operating completely against my design, completely against my nature. And it felt like no matter what I physically did, there was actually no tangible result, because it was operating again against my organic nature. And when I stopped that spiral, because that's what it felt like, a spiral, when I stopped it and backpedaled and went back to concepts of identity and purpose, which again, when I share this social media post, you're going to see this image, this iceberg image of what's above the iceberg and what's below the iceberg. And you're going to understand much more clearly what I'm talking about. The below the iceberg component is the feminine receptive. It's all the things that we don't really consider to be as significant as the things above, where the iceberg is actually visible, right? The visible part of the iceberg are things like email marketing and funnels and ads and all these things that we glorify in the world of business and we consider to be significant. And things like sustainability, aura type, dharma, purpose, natural leadership style, all those things that are below the iceberg. We're like, we don't even need that. That's woo-woo stuff. That's not really that important. That's not going to affect the bottom line, except it does. Because when shit gets hard above the surface and you don't know why it's working and you have no grounding point for what's below the surface, you're going to be lost and you're going to panic because there's no anchor for you. The whole point of starting with identity and purpose and allowing that feminine aspect of business to be there first is for it to hold you when shit gets crazy above the surface and you're operating and plugging in those masculine aspects of business. Okay, because they don't always work out the way that we expect, right? So when shit gets hectic and crazy up here, you have something to ground you and to stand on because you already established that, because you know why you're there and you know what you're doing and you know why you're doing it. Okay. So I wanted to come on here and share this because someone needs to hear this. Maybe more than one someone needs to hear this. I know I spent many, many years approaching business from that very masculine pursuit, paying attention to the fastest swimmer, the fastest tadpole, and not really spending the amount of time that I really needed to understanding the more feminine components of my business. And as a result, it felt very chaotic and never left me feeling satisfied. And when I reversed that, it's when the anxiety stopped. It's when the chaos stopped. It's when I stopped overextending. It's when I stopped burning out. It's when I stopped saying yes to things that didn't feel correct and I started saying yes to things that did. It influenced how I approached all the other aspects of my business dramatically. And as a result, then the results that I was yielding, because it was in the correct flow, it was in the correct order. So if this spoke to you, I'd love to hear in the comments what you received from this, or if you had any ahas as you were listening to this. And again, I will be sharing that post later today so that you can visually see what I'm sharing, what I'm talking about. And this is my invitation for you. If you haven't watched my masterclass, I held live masterclasses called Success by Design. It is now available for anybody to watch. If you have not watched this masterclass, I highly, highly encourage you to watch it. It was super powerful and left everybody who attended feeling like, whoa, so much information, but so much insight into where to move next in alignment with their cosmic blueprint. I will go ahead and drop the link for that below. It's right on my website. You can register to receive the masterclass straight to your inbox, and you can activate some key components of your business for 2023 so that you get into alignment and you get into sustainability and you stop the burnout and you stop second guessing yourself. All right? So happy Monday. I'm sending you massive amounts of love and wishing you a powerful,